Today I'm entering Sakode Prison, a place built to hold thousands of suspected members of the MS-13 and Barrio 18. Imagine walking through a prison where thousands of men are locked behind steel doors, men accused of murder, kidnapping, rape, and some of the most violent crimes imaginable. Now imagine that many of them once belonged to two gangs that were at war with each other, enemies who spent years fighting in the streets, but now they are trapped inside the same fortress. And there is something even more disturbing. Once you pass through the final gate, you don't simply walk back out. This is Sakode, El Salvador's massive maximum security prison, a place built for one purpose: to lock away the country's most dangerous gang members. And today we are going inside, not looking at it from the outside, not watching it from a distance. We are walking through the gates, past the guards, past the checkpoints, and into the cells where some of the most feared criminals in the country are now spending their lives. But before we enter, we need to understand how El Salvador reached this point. For decades the country struggled with violent criminal gangs. Two names became symbols of that violence: MS-13 and Barrio 18. These gangs were bitter enemies. They controlled territories, they fought each other, and they terrified ordinary people. Then something changed. Nayib Bukele became president, and instead of treating the gang problem as business as usual, his government launched an aggressive campaign against them. The country entered a state of emergency. Mass arrests followed, and suddenly thousands of suspected criminals were being taken off the streets. But there was a problem. Where do you put tens of thousands of people? The answer was Sakode, a prison so enormous, so heavily guarded, and so isolated that it feels less like a normal prison and more like a fortress built to contain an army. We drove for about an hour from the city, and as the road continued the feeling began to change, because you know what is waiting at the end. Then we saw it. Sakode, the first thing that hits you is the security. This isn't the kind of prison where you simply walk through a front door. Before entering you go through strict security checks, then another checkpoint, then another inspection. Clothing is checked, even socks are checked. Everything has to meet the rules, and the deeper you go, the more you begin to understand something. The prison isn't designed around freedom, it is designed around control. Cameras are everywhere, fingerprint scanners are used to verify identities, advanced facial recognition systems monitor people, motion sensors are positioned around the facility. Every movement can be watched. Every entrance can be controlled, every exit can be sealed, and we haven't even reached the prisoners yet. There are massive cell blocks inside Sakode, each one capable of holding thousands of inmates. This isn't simply a building full of cells, it is a gigantic security machine. And then you see the walls, massive concrete barriers reinforced with barbed wire watchtowers surrounding the prison, and armed personnel positioned throughout the facility. The message is obvious: escape is not supposed to be an option. The prison is guarded by hundreds of soldiers and police officers, and inside there is even an armory. Weapons, equipment, restraints, everything prepared for emergencies, because the government didn't build Sakode to feel comfortable, it built Sakode to make sure the people inside remain inside. And now we are getting closer, much closer to the part everyone came to see: the prisoners. We approach the final section, and suddenly the atmosphere changes, because just beyond these doors are members of the gangs that once terrorized El Salvador. People who were once feared outside these walls are now completely surrounded by them. And then the gate opens, we enter, and there they are, hundreds of prisoners wearing the same white uniforms, surrounded by guards. There is no dramatic music, no movie scene, just men sitting inside a massive prison. But somehow that makes it even more disturbing, because you begin to realize this is real. These are not actors, these are real prisoners inside a real prison, and their entire world has been reduced to these walls. The lights remain on constantly. The prisoners don't control the schedule, they don't control the doors, they don't control where they go, they don't decide when they leave. The guards control the environment, and the prisoners remain inside, cell after cell, door after door. The cells can hold huge numbers of inmates. Yet there are fewer beds than prisoners. There are no comfortable rooms, no private spaces, no normal life. And when prisoners are allowed outside for exercise, the time is limited. They use their own body weight, they exercise, and then they go back inside. The door closes and the cycle begins again: inside, outside, inside again, day after day. Then there is something else that reveals the past of many of these prisoners: their tattoos. To ordinary people, a tattoo can simply be a tattoo, but inside the world of gangs, a symbol can mean something very different: a number, a name, a skull, a grave, a symbol of a gang, or a memorial to someone who died. Police used tattoo catalogs to help identify gang affiliations. Some gang members even tried to change their tattoos, but changing the ink didn't necessarily erase the past, and now all those symbols are trapped behind the same walls, because something almost unbelievable has happened. The two gangs that once fought each other are now imprisoned together, MS-13 and Barrio 18, enemies on the streets but prisoners under the same system. Imagine that two groups that once fought for territory now share the same prison, the same walls, the same restrictions, the same guards, and the same fate. Their lives have been reduced to a small space inside a massive concrete fortress. Even the toilet is inside the cell. There is no walking outside whenever they want, no normal family visits, no freedom to simply leave. Their entire existence is now controlled by the prison. And then we enter another area, one that feels even darker: solitary confinement. If a prisoner seriously misbehaves, he can be sent here, a small isolated cell with almost nothing inside, no normal environment, no freedom, no distractions. Food is delivered directly to the prisoner, rice, beans, and little else. The purpose is simple: separation, control, and punishment. And then we heard the story of one prisoner, an MS-13 member who said he had killed dozens of people. But what makes his story so disturbing isn't only what he claims to have done, it's what he said afterward. He said he cries every day. He says he regrets what he did. He says he wishes things could have been different, but regret doesn't reverse time, and it doesn't bring anyone back. What makes his story even darker is how young he was when he entered the world of gangs. He was only 11 years old, 11 at an age when most children are thinking about school, friends, games, and the future. He had already entered a world of violence, and now his future is behind these walls inside Saco. There are also medical workers, nurses are present, doctors visit, and medical care is provided because prisoners cannot simply leave the facility to seek treatment elsewhere. Even communication with lawyers happens through video. Trials can be handled without taking prisoners outside. Everything happens inside. The prison becomes their entire world. But there is another side to Saco: the guards. They live under a completely different set of rules. There are dormitories for them, there are facilities designed for their well-being, there is even a gym, because while the prisoners are locked behind doors, the guards must remain physically and mentally prepared. They are surrounded by people considered extremely dangerous, and that creates another strange reality: the people inside are completely separated by their roles, the prisoner and the guard, the locked door and the person holding the key. But why did El Salvador go this far? The answer is simple: security. For years, ordinary people lived under the shadow of gangs, and the government argued that drastic measures were necessary. The state of emergency, the mass arrests, the creation of Saco, and the enormous security apparatus all became part of the same strategy to take gang members away from the streets. And supporters of the government saw something they believed they had been waiting for: safety, a feeling that the streets were becoming safer, a feeling strong enough to transform the political landscape. But this story is not simple, because Saco is not just a prison, it is a symbol of the government's war against gangs, a symbol of the dramatic changes in El Salvador, and also a symbol of the enormous debate surrounding how far a government should go in the name of security. Because when you stand outside these walls, you can think of Saco as a fortress, but when you enter, you realize something much more disturbing: the walls are not the only thing keeping people inside. The entire system is designed around one idea: control. The cameras, the guards, the checkpoints, the locked doors, the restricted movement, the constant surveillance, everything points toward the same conclusion: you enter and your world becomes smaller and smaller until all that remains are concrete walls, steel doors, and time. And perhaps that is the most terrifying part: not the weapons, not the watchtowers, not even the prisoners, but the thought of waking up every day knowing exactly where you are, knowing the door is locked, knowing the walls are surrounding you, and knowing that the outside world is continuing without you. The streets move on, people go to work, children grow up, families change, years pass, but you remain here inside the same walls, behind the same doors, under the same lights. And then the realization hits: Saco was built to keep people from escaping, but for the people inside, the real sentence may not be the wall, it may be time itself. Because when the door closes, you don't just lose your freedom, you lose control over almost every part of your life. And that is what makes this place so unsettling. Saco isn't simply a prison, it is the final destination of a war against the gangs of El Salvador, a place where former enemies have been forced behind the same walls, a place where men once feared on the streets are now surrounded by guards, a place where every movement is controlled, and where escape is designed to be almost impossible. We came here expecting to see a prison, but what we found was something much bigger: a country trying to erase the power of its gangs, one locked door at a time. And as we leave, there is one final thought that stays with you: outside these walls, people wanted freedom from fear. Inside these walls, freedom is exactly what the prisoners lost, and somewhere between those two realities is the story of Saco, the fortress, the prison, and one of the darkest